And we're off. Hey, folks, welcome to the Notary Governance call for Tuesday, June 8th. I'm just going to kick off with slides as usual. And I think the focus this time will pretty much be on elections and the large data set notaries. Can somebody give me a quick thumbs up if you can see the black slide with Filecoin Plus? Perfect. Thank you very much. So yeah, let's get started. Again, as usual, if you have any questions or any thoughts, raise your hand, interrupt me by unmuting yourself, drop something in chat. This is an open forum. It's an open conversation. No sweat. Don't perceive any friction of interrupting the flow because this is supposed to be a forum for discussion. So yeah, with that, let's get started. So things that I want to talk about this time. So we'll do a quick DataCap flow overview and delta from the last time we talked. This has become sort of a fixture in our biweekly calls as we see the progress that we're making as a community. Then let's talk about support for large data set notaries and notary elections. And then we'll definitely keep some time for open issues and discussion if there are any topics that people would like to flag. First things first, we finally had some movement. So as I'd called out in the previous call, the 2 weeks prior to the election sort of application due thing were very quiet. We actually had 0 applications accepted by notaries, and people generally just pointed at thinking about applications and getting the applications in order. And so in the last 2 weeks, while we've been doing scoring, it looks like some applications are definitely going through. So 7 allocations went through the repo with about 45 terabytes of data, DataCap being allocated through GitHub. There's a net of 2 new applications. So there's 15 if you look in the repo, of which 13 are actually notaries that don't actually have DataCap because it's ran out of it from the previous election. Of course, these notaries are also some of them reapplying for DataCap in this round of elections, so that might fix the problem. But it does point to us needing to figure out a flow where once a notary runs out of DataCap, what happens to the people that wanted to apply to that notary? And so if anybody has any tips or suggestions for redirection or expectations that we should set on notaries in terms of once you run out of DataCap, like what do you want to do with your open applications? I would love to have that conversation. I know some of you have run into that issue before, and some of you actually have received applications like Masaki before he could even approve them because of bugs that we had in getting them set up. So I just wanted to take a second and see if anybody had ideas around how we can operationalize or do some more systematic readdressing of applications in the case that a notary can't serve an application. So if you have any ideas, I would love to hear them. Chat, unmute, anything. I'm going to give you guys a couple of seconds of silence. Quiet crowd today. Well, worst case, something to put in the back of your minds as you think about it. So for those of you that are notaries in the call, the question to you would be, in the case that you receive an application that you can't actually address, whether that's because you don't want to or because you can't, what do you think is a reasonable expectation the community should have or a client should have in how you redirect them somewhere, or if the conversation that you do have with them in terms of how they can get set up for DataCap? Don't need a collector arrive on an opinion today, but just something to think about. Next up, DataCap distribution and where it lies in the flow. At the moment, we have 775 terabytes roughly. I think it's 774 or something like that, but it's pretty close. Up a substantive amount, and I think I typoed this. Instead of 50 from verified.glyph.io, it should be 350 or 250, something like that. Pretty substantial amount from verified.glyph.io, of course, because that's the automated notary. And I think what's actually interesting is I think we crossed. Actually, I remember seeing this. So we crossed our 100th actual successful allocation from GitHub. So verified.glyph.io should be a little bit less than that, but congratulations to the community. It's kind of awesome to see more than 100 applications getting granted to the GitHub repo. That's fantastic. About 30% of that DataCap is being used, 11% of total. So still definitely progress there in terms of operationalizing clients and ensuring that they understand what to do with it. Time to DataCap continues to go down slightly. So 4 weeks ago to 2 weeks ago, it was down 3 hours. Now it's down about 3.5 hours. So we're continuing to trend in the right direction. I think ideally we'd like to get that number substantively less, but it's still trending in the right way. So that's awesome. The auto close bot that we had all talked about a couple of weeks ago is finally in operation, and it's doing quite a lot of work. And so are active notaries. So congrats to all of you folks that are working together, because the stats are looking a lot better in terms of how we're addressing things. So as you can see, 101 granted applications, days to granted dropping, median days to granted dropping, number of issues open substantively less. So this is a report that I just grabbed from the URL that Andrew's team at Textile maintains for just notary stats that they publish. But just good to see general directions trending the right way. Of course, as a notary, if you have any ideas or suggestions or feedback on the tooling that is available to you, or the path to giving DataCap out to clients and ways in which we can make it more efficient or make it easier for you or lower friction, then would love to have that conversation anytime. And if you have specific ideas on how to improve it, then please feel free to kick off an issue, and we should definitely have that conversation, because we're still pretty young in this community. We've got quite a ways to go, and we've got big ambitions in terms of making the network useful. And so working together to do that, especially at these early stages to make you operationally efficient, should be a priority. Actually, before we head on to this, are there any questions? Anybody have any thoughts or want to share anything regarding like applications that may have come in the last couple of weeks, or in general, any thoughts around things that we can do to improve the process?
Hi. Are you going to talk about the large ones, or
Yeah,
it's going to be later?
We'll talk about the large ones immediately after this. I think we should just move on to that. That's all good. Let's do it. So last time we had our first conversation around the large dataset notaries. So quick refresher for those of you that are new to the concept. The idea was basically proposed in issue number 94, which was labeled onboarding projects with large data cap requirements. And the idea was we needed to come up with a way that we could support open public data sets that were meant to be retrievable by anyone at scale with DataCap. So we initially targeted a range of between 500 PB to 5 PB of DataCap, and clients could apply on a per project or per data set basis for that amount of DataCap. And 7 notaries would effectively volunteer or will volunteer themselves to be signers on a multi-sig notary that's established for that specific client request. And so there's a repo that's been stood up. You may have seen applications already coming in. You may have also seen that we've been doing some testing with the bot, because we're trying to set up the bot the same way we have it for today's flow for setting up a notary, as well as managing and facilitating client onboarding. And so hopefully, we'll continue to make progress on that front. The quick point of discussion that was raised last time, actually, which I wanted to circle back on, was we had this conversation on the 3K Rise Genome project, where people had split opinions on whether or not we should support projects that are coming in from the Slingshot competition. So some notaries express support for that, and some notaries express dissent. And then members from the community also were split on this. And so Andrew Hill's request to me was actually, as somebody that's helping facilitate Slingshot, I should present sort of my opinion as well on whether or not we should be supporting Slingshot projects. And so from last call, I want to share my update, but I also want to open the room up to conversation. My opinion, basically, and I guess in many ways, the Slingshot organizers' opinions, is basically that I don't think these teams need to be incentivized with large scale data cap. It's very difficult to provide data cap for all of them. There's also a really high rate of self attribution for the deal making. Slingshot allows for storing data with just 4 miners, and you can store up to 30% of your data with the same miner, and there's not a lot of tracking there on self-dealing and things like that. And so it could probably lead to pretty disproportionate data cap gains for certain miners, especially when they're already being incentivized and effectively being paid by their participation in the competition. I would much rather that notary time is spent actually serving clients that are net new to the network, are looking at ways to onboard and ramp up on the network, and are doing it because they have a use case for the network directly and aren't just incentivized to participate in the competition. And so, yeah, my perspective is that we should probably keep this for other projects that exist, like the many applications that have already been received and many more to come. But, open for conversation. I know, Charles, you're here. You had some ideas about this. Faye, you were the one that opened the application. I'm sure you've got ideas and thoughts. There's a couple other Slingshot participants and Slingshot organizers and also members of the community that might have thoughts. So maybe let's take a pause here and have a few minutes of conversation. If you feel strongly about supporting or not supporting Slingshot teams through the large data set notaries, please feel free to share your thoughts. Or even if you don't feel strongly and you have questions that you want to ask or raise to the community.
So can I speak?
Absolutely.
Okay. I think this need to be discussed case by case, because lots of if everybody in the Slingshot team applies here, most of them are self-dealing, so it's kind of a reverse in their perspective, so they get more efficient seeding process. But for me, I send my deals to other people, to minor X fellows, to small miners. I don't get anything in return except the price, but they get the benefit of the fast or efficient growth of their power. Yeah, so that's why I am applying for this, so that we both win. That's my argument about why I apply for it.
Any thoughts on that? I think, Faye, one of the flags that was raised last time is that it's very difficult to tease apart the teams that do comply with that versus the ones that don't. It's very difficult in general to identify cases of like self-attribution. And so without very good auditing systems in place where we can track how DataCap is being used, I think it becomes tricky. And then Charles also, yeah, go on, sorry, so sorry.
Yeah. Also the Miner X 2.0 gives small miners some Filecoins to use, and I think having be able to receive more verified deals per Miner X fellow can make better use of the coins that they get, because I can send them out very quickly.
Fair enough, but then those miners are also being awarded a grant and being incentivized to take the deals, right? Whereas one of the benefits of DataCap is ensuring that regardless of what the additional incentives are that are being provided to help bootstrap the network at this early phase, like we're ensuring that clients have a clear path to making like reliable storage or getting reliable storage on the network. Yeah, I mean, that's a fair perspective. Charles, I know you had some thoughts on this, if you want to share.
Yes, actually, like for me, like I was thinking that yeah, it does have some effect as a double incentives. So, but I also do agree with Fian that while doing the deal making, he needed to spend the time and management those deals as well. So as we discussed last time, it can be either part of the program, but it may be difficult to be both in the both program. Yeah.
Any other thoughts, opinions? Yeah. Sorry, I can't see your name because of Zoom, but you have your hand up. Please feel free to share. Did we lose the hand? I think we lost the hand. Galen, did you catch who it was? Oh, it's Suhao. Yeah, please go for it. Yeah, we don't hear you. Sounds good.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry. So, like I was like mentioned the last time. So I think this kind of case sounds good because actually their fans like want to helping like minor ex fellows, but like what I have said last time, we have to make sure there's no any like money exchange between them, which I think will be quite hard to monitor. Yeah.
I mean, that's the problem, is that like these things are close to impossible. Like at the end of the day, this is a completely anonymous peer-to-peer network, and there's pros and cons that come with that, right?
I think the monitoring problem will be a problem regardless whether it's from me or from any other
Yes,
team.
that I wholeheartedly agree with as well. Yeah, I agree with that. That makes perfect sense. I think the other thing that Charles raised last time, which resonated strongly with me, was some teams will have disproportionate benefit as a result of this in terms of their participation and have inflated like client-side rewards. Other teams may not. There's also, in general today, there is not that much consistency. Like if you look across applications, some notaries are definitely giving DataCap for Slingshot, some notaries are not. And so I think there's like two levels at which we could have this conversation, right? One is like, do we want to say that Slingshot is outside the scope of large data set notaries only, or do we want to say Slingshot is out of scope of Filecoin Plus? And I think for both of those conversations, there's arguments to be made on either side, but it might be important to separate those two as well, because I don't know, like to some extent, like Faye, I think what you're saying makes sense, and if a notary is able to do the due diligence and follow up, then maybe it's okay. Maybe there's like an upfront sort of disclosure on what miners you're storing data with and what the logic is that you're using to identify those miners, and there's agreements like sort of in place and there's follow through, right? Like if upfront the client says I'll make deals with X amount of miner IDs, that's something that we can monitor, and we can see what those miner IDs are and whether or not they line up with the expectations that the client set. So yeah, I think depending on the rigor of the due diligence, there are ways in which you could probably support this at different scales. I just think that the large data set notary stuff where we're looking at like hundreds of tebibytes or pebibytes, that becomes more and more unwieldy and difficult and a hard point to support. But again, if the majority of the notaries are in consensus, then I think that's sort of part of community governance, as we work together to figure out what the right thing is. I think last time we had notaries that were supportive and unsupportive, and so that's why the question came on like, what does the Slingshot organization team think? And that's why I'm just expressing this opinion that I think that clients are already being rewarded to bring that data. So I think large scale data cap may not be necessary, but clients don't have to be necessarily banned from being able to apply if they so choose, because some notaries are still providing that data cap. I think Peter, if you have any thoughts as well as somebody who has experience with some of this stuff in Slingshot, feel free to share. Sorry, Faye, you were going to say? Sorry to cut you off. Yeah, I mean, the reason we need 7 notaries to authorize this data cap is that they're expected to do more duty, like verification of the client, whether the client's abusing it or not. Yeah, I mean, if the client is all sending to themselves, they can stop granting more, I guess, because it's a stepped in different steps. The large data set is granted. Because rejecting slingshots is like treating this large data cap as something that has a high value in the sense of the client can sell it, but I mean, for me, I'm not going to sell it. It's just easier to benefit the miners that are taking my deals. Any other thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I was just thinking, are you going to send those deals without the verified data cap to the miners? Because I don't think normally you would send those deals only to your own miner, right? In Slingshot. So the DataCap basically enables you to send the deals to the miner X miners, right?
Is that a question for Faye specifically in this case?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I only have one small miner, so I sent the majority of the deal outside. I don't have a large operation, so.
So for Slingshot.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
I talk to people on the Miner X channel and deal with them one by one.
Yeah, because Slingshot is a little bit tricky because you have a risk that the deal ain't retrievable. So you always depend on others. So I'm not involved in Slingshot, but to my belief, it was that you were allowed to send it to your own miner. So that's the reason a lot of the Slingshot deals basically were stored on people's own miners. But that's how far I understood it. So from that perspective, when you use verified DataCap to enable you to send it to other miners without having the risk of, without having the retrieval risk, then I would say I'm all in favor of doing this.
So I think the other thing, Wynand, is that part of Slingshot is that a client is getting a distribution like at the end of it, right? And so I've seen, as somebody who's participated in the scoring of Slingshot, I've seen clients just pay for unverified data because they make that money back.
But they store it on their own miner then.
No, there are people that store it outside their own miners because they don't have enough miner IDs, because there is a requirement that you meet at least 4 miner IDs.
Is that so? Because I thought in the latest version of Slingshot, it disappeared.
Yeah, so there's no way to prove that a miner ID doesn't belong to you easily. So the part that was removed was no self-dealing being tracked, but you still have 4 miner IDs at least being represented. And so you could have 4 miner IDs, which I'm sure some teams do. Yeah.
So from that perspective, if somebody takes the risk to send it elsewhere, like you send your data to like 8 or 12 miners instead of 4, then the verified DataCap enables you to do this and benefit others.
It only enables you to do this at a cheaper cost. It's not that it enables you to do this, because you're enabled anyway.
The cost is 0 anyway. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's just offloading. And so then the conversation we're really having is like, do we want to provide compensation for that? Like, because really, when we give DataCap, it's that we're saying that we as a community are choosing to leverage the network to reward a certain kind of behavior, correct? Yeah. And so then the conversation then turns into, do we as a community believe the network should additionally subsidize Slingshot-based deal making when it's already subsidized because one of the organizations in the ecosystem is paying for it?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. From my perspective, I have no choice but to use other miners.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good idea to decentralize my storage anyway. And I talked to them personally, testing the retrievals since the beginning of the phase, and report any findings back to the community, to the team. I think we have made lots of bug fixes during the process about the retrievals, and it's nice.
Yeah. Makes sense. Any other thoughts or opinions on this? I think this is still an ongoing conversation because we have the other group of folks that aren't here in today's call that were in the other one. So probably we should bring this up one more time and then wrap it up in the next governance call. So if those of you that are here today that do have an opinion on this, especially if you're a Slingshot participant or if you're a notary that has an opinion, it's an excellent time to share. Okay. Charles, I see your icon is lighting up, but I'm not sure if you're trying to speak. I don't hear you.
Yes, I was thinking about something, but maybe not relevant to this one. Is like, do we have a timeline of approve those data set of first batch of a large data set?
So we have 9 applications that are open right now, and so that's a good. I think we can switch over to this. So these are the 9 applications that are open. The last time we had this call, only the first 4 were open, and then there's 5 additional that have opened since then. None of these have received 7 notaries support, and so what I wanted to do today was also talk about that a little bit and say, hey, like notaries, it would be great if you could go and ask the questions that you need to ask. This is not about like you have to say yes to these things. It's more we should be pushing the conversation and raising the standard and the bar for these clients and how they represent their data and their data sets on the network.
Yeah, I'm not a notary, but I spent a few minutes before the meeting go through each application.
What do you want to talk through some of your opinions? So Charles, just to be absolutely clear, the expressed instructions are that everybody in the community should be helping with the due diligence. And so you don't have to be a notary to help keep the bar high. I think the only reason we need the notaries is so we have like people that are being held accountable to like manage the signing and tracking. But everybody in the community should feel free to, flag an opinion, share their thoughts on these applications, because these are massive, right? Like the total amount of DataCap that was allocated to all notaries was less than 2 PB in the first election cycle. In the second election cycle, it's probably going to be like, between 3 and 5 PB, maybe a little more, but say 5 PB. That's still equal to what some of these like single data sets are asking. And so as you think about like the world of Filecoin Plus, like getting these right and ensuring that they're value additive and tracked correctly is, I think, extremely important for us. But it's also like an awesome like lever of improving the rate at which we're onboarding data onto the network.
Yeah.
So yeah, please feel free to speak through any of these applications. I have the list pulled up here. You just point at it, talk through it. Let's have the conversation.
Yeah, it's like I go through each of them, and I think it can be categorized like 3 major categories. One is the foundation-like category. So those category like they have some large direction. So I want to do this type of data set, but we don't really have specific data yet. So this kind of one. So if we go to this part, according to what we have as a condition criteria set, we want 500 terabytes larger can be defined a large data set. I don't know how can we define it because it just don't have that much yet. So this is one type. Another type is scientific data. For example, the Filecoin discovery and 3000 rice genome. Those data set from the data itself, there's I think it's no argument about how important they are. So those ones, if we don't take something like slingshot or not slingshot as a consideration, personally, I think they are good. Then the last one is something very tricky is some companies' data. Because for those company data, to put it as a large data set, it's really like the expert experience. For example, some photos. Are those photos good enough to open to the public? Do I have a copyright issue? And this part needs due diligence, doing very carefully to avoid the copyright issue or some other GDPR issue. Because as we mentioned before, if this data, when they send out the deal and the miners accept it, one day someone come to you said, okay, we want this data to be deleted, the miners will be in some kind of trouble. So the private company, not really private, but a company-wise data to market as a large data set, we need to be careful. So it's just my thoughts.
Thank you for sharing. That's awesome. Any responses, thoughts, comments? So I do want to flag, Charles, that last time we had like talking about the third category for Tau Pi Pi, we had one of the folks on that team in the call, in the last governance call, right? And he specifically talked about onboarding only the data that he knew would not be issues, like there would be no issues with copyright. So he did address that. But I do agree with you that that is an additional layer of complexity that we should be extremely pedantic about in this process. Like we should expressively say that, hey, this is what's happening. We're going to ensure that like it's only the stuff that is compliant. It should be retrievable. We should be able to test that as a community to retrieve it. Notaries themselves should be able to test the retrieval and ensure that they can access the data. But I do agree that, you know, one of the conditions we're setting forth in the large data set stuff, like if you look at the definition here, right, the first bullet here says supporting open public data sets that are retrievable by anyone. And I think that means that like open data, not encrypted data, not personal data, not like private data, that is all implied. And so maybe it needs to be a little bit more explicit. But at least for this first round, like we scoped this program to be a 50 petabyte program to test it out. So for these first 50 petabytes, I think adhering to that is probably the right thing to do, mostly from a perspective of minimizing the complexity and maximizing the likelihood that we learn how to audit these things, because the challenges that we will face as a community in ensuring that like DataCap is being distributed well to open data sets will be just a subset of the ones that we will face when we move towards supporting company data or private data. And so this gives us an opportunity and buys us time for these 50 petabytes to learn together as a community what actually needs to happen. Thoughts on that? I see the chat is also relatively active. It looks like we have, Reba is here from Filecoin Discover. And looks like Nelson is relatively supportive. Reba, do you want to share your thoughts on copyright, or are you just here generally to talk about Discover?
No, not really. I basically just made this comment that I would be very cautious saying something needs to not have copyright claims on it, because copyright claims are very jurisdiction specific. So while in general, like obviously, I don't know, just general wares and movies and stuff like that, that is obviously not a fit for Filecoin. It gets more tricky, for example, in the case of there is for example, data hoarders effort going on right now to save all the Sci-Hub research articles and basically put them out of reach of of US copyright, where it's questionable whether public research should be copyrighted by anybody, and so on and so forth. So this is something that Filecoin as a community should be a little bit more nuanced about, as opposed to just slapping like, well, somebody's copyrighted this, and it has no place in Filecoin Plus. I just want to call this out.
That makes sense. Yeah, Jonathan, please.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between going from data that's not online today and putting that onto Filecoin, because then you've got questions around, is there copyright or isn't there? If the content's already online somewhere and has been online for a number of years, I suppose you have more peace of mind that you can move it from another network to Filecoin. But there is a responsibility around who moves it due to them putting it on the network with this TIPI, I think it is. Yeah. Somebody ultimately needs to be responsible for that content. So it can't be the notaries, but it must be there must be a point where somebody has to validate that we are responsible. And also, if the content goes into the sectors and a sector's sealed for 1.5 years, but you get a cease and desist, which has got a 30-day timeline, then that's the real problem here, right?
Yep.
With 1 petabyte of information. That's right. So, yeah, it's a tricky one. I think what might be best is to have a halfway house, i.e. you've got this content over here, it is a certain data size, you move it to a place where it's open and everybody can see it, and it sits there in limbo for a certain amount of time, and then you allow it in, just to give you that kind of extra assurance that, that it is online, that nobody's sent you a cease and desist for a while, and then it's allowed to move into Filecoin long term. Maybe we could even look at like data going onto the network but unsealed, so it's easy to pull out quickly for the first 6 months. I don't know, like I'd have to speak to my head of engineering, but there might be some way just to have a halfway house for a while.
Yeah, Riba, you want to go?
Yeah, I have a quick comment on that. Don't speak to your engineer, speak to your lawyer. I am not your lawyer, and I'm not a lawyer. However, there is some amount of prior cases around GitHub Git repositories containing stuff that was later subject to a cease and desist and removal. And in the case of the Linux kernel, multiple times the accepted response was, oh, we're just going to add an extra commit to effectively this mini blockchain that removes this stuff. Everything is still there, but the tip of the master does not show it anymore, and this is considered sufficient to be cease and desist. This applied to Filecoin could be interpreted as long as the miners no longer provide retrieval of this data, it effectively no longer exists. So I would generally not introduce panic in terms of like, oh crap, now I need to delete the sector. No, you just need to add steps that this particular CID, particular root cannot be retrieved. And Lotus at least already provides some rudimentary tooling for this, where you can literally hook every retrieval and have a yes/no filter in front of it that you implement yourself.
So maybe we just need a blacklist for the CID hashes then. So we can update the content, but with a black image, with an image that's something you can't see the old one, and then that would mean that people wouldn't be able to access it.
Precisely, and there are actually some efforts by an external team trying to build a way for miners to communicate such denial lists between themselves. I am not, however, exactly sure how far this effort is. I know, Deep, if you know much.
Perfect. Sounds like we need a Filecoin 404. So, we can just update images with, a certain error message once we want to not allow people to see them.
Yes, I think you still need to talk to the lawyer. So or the miners, maybe when they take those verified ideas, they need to have some kind of potential contract that you should aware that one day somebody asks you to delete the sector and you have to do that. Terms and part of the verified idea, terms and the conditions to let at least you know that you might have this issue. Not necessarily happen, but you need to know that.
Just one more, sorry, Deep. Due to us being a regulatory, we have a Australian financial license and we report to ASIC. For us to have, I don't think as a miner we could even have that information on our. Right. I think some could, but we couldn't. So that puts us in a bit of a tricky situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think so there's a couple of thoughts just to tease out here. So the first is, let's separate the conversation from the large data set notaries and the regular notary applications. So talking about the large data set notaries, I think we should just be scoping this for public and open data. Like I said before, that's going to educate us a bunch. We have a lot of learnings we need from it. It's something that we can grow from, and we have even ways to at least test it and validate that it's working and doing the things we needed to do. And that's not really an opinion. That's like what we've been talking about for the last several weeks and now a couple of months on that issue number 94, that led us as a community to believe that's what we want to support. Then there's and so specifically for Tau Pai Pai, they are only looking to onboard this set of photos. So Charles, to your point, they have a very large amount of data. From what I understand, it's, double-digit PB, but only like 6 PB or 8 PB they said was like open data that was like non-copyright infringed photos where they had permissions from photographers to share that publicly. That was the set, at least as I understood it from the conversation, that they wanted to onboard through this program. Which to me makes sense. If anybody can look at that today online, as Jonathan is saying, like anybody can go to their website and download a copy, then it existing on Filecoin is the same level of risk and the same level of like authorization or copyright that might exist on that data. And so that's okay. Then there's the question of like Filecoin Plus in general, like to what extent can we encourage deal making or storage of content that could lend itself to these kinds of problems? And I think that's where the conversation gets a little trickier, because there are notaries who are serving requests from companies who want to store encrypted data that don't want to share what that data is. And so actually, Fenbushi has a phenomenal sort of offline verification process as well. If you look at their application, I think we still have the notary there. Ziha, you're still here, right? If you're here, do you want to just speak for like a minute or two on the validation that you're doing for clients that are looking to bring encrypted data onto the network?
So like we have like our like due diligence process and listed on GitHub. So our basic principle is that we have to make due diligence and like to see like first of all, is this company like really exist? So we're gonna check a lot of like COIS or something like that to see that like, and also like to see if they have like paying rent and other like information. And we also going to check their like equity, everything, which could be the equity structure, something like that. This kind of information can be like easily found on Chinese website if they were if they are a like Chinese company. So secondly, we're gonna check on their data. Like we will see like how they will proceed with their data. Will they like before uploading to the Filecoin network, will they like do they have like a necessary process to make sure that their data will be no problem, no copyright problem, and also like their data will not be like be used for bad use. So that's basically the two major principles that we do for like due diligence. One is their company, and two, their data.
So I think that works, but I don't know to what extent that works at scale. And I also don't know to what extent that works for companies that aren't even comfortable sharing that. And so that's one thing. And then I guess Jonathan and Riva's point that like the nature of how the rest of the world interprets that data may also change over the course of like the lifetime of that deal, which also has other problematic implications. And so I think in general, like, skewing towards public stuff makes sense. We are also working on a bunch of tooling to help validate that public stuff is being stored correctly. But yeah, I think in certain cases, if you can build that confidence, I think it makes sense. I'm curious to hear, actually, Jonathan, if you have any responses to that or any thoughts based on their process at Fenbushi.
Not at this moment. I'm going to have to think about this one. It's quite multifaceted, and also, it's going to be regional as well, right? Like, some things are going to work in China, some things are going to work in Oceania, Australia. So yeah, I just need to think about this one.
Yeah, like for our like due diligence process, like for some parts, so if it's not like easy to describe it through the mail or GitHub, we will just ask them to like provide us like PowerPoint on their product to like demonstrate how their data is dealing, how their product like will their product we will check on their product to see like if there is any potential risk.
Sorry, I'm muted. So one of the questions I was going to ask you actually is, these are all regional rules too, right? So does that work because you're doing this for clients that are in the Greater China region that are also storing with miners in the Greater China region? Like what happens when you cross that like geopolitical boundary? What happens if that data is being stored outside the region, or if clients are trying to, or do you just count that as out of scope for now because of the complexity that comes with that?
I mean, like for the equity part, I think it's not gonna be easy to check for like for outside China. But like for other part, I think it's all makes sense. But I think the difference will be like how you will define their data will be like legal or illegal in different region. So I can make sure like their data will be legal in China, but we do need like because like for their application to be proceed, we need 3 regions notary to be represented, right? So I think the other 2, and also like as their application was just describing like how their plan on I mean sending their deals to the the miners. So I mean if the listed miners are in like Oceania or in other region, I mean the representatives of that region should check on like the validity of their data.
Yeah, I mean, makes sense. Love to hear the other thoughts as well.
Maybe we don't need to worry about the data from China is have issue with other region, or other regions data have issue with China or Asian. I mean, maybe just like China government bans the YouTube, they maybe can build another wall to ban the Filecoin with some minor IDs. Possible.
Yeah, I mean that is that risk extends beyond Filecoin Plus then, right?
Yeah, but yeah.
I mean, sure.
Yeah, because if it's really region based, and sometimes that it's a government responsibility to do that, maybe it's out of our control.
Yeah, I think one thing I'd love to understand is, are we generally, so for the scope of large data set notaries, is there anybody that feels we should make an extra effort to support non-public data sets? Because that's, to me, that's like something we've agreed upon as like outside the scope of the program, but given that we are discussing it, I think it's worth flagging. I think so if you believe we should make an effort to support private company data or encrypted data through the large data set notary, then I would say, you should flag that. We should have a conversation. Maybe the right next step there is to just create an issue where you say we should expand the scope of the program, because right now the way it's defined is very specifically for that, like the case in which like we think it's open data, public data, like referenceable. So that's one. The second is for the applications that were open, more than 2 weeks ago, we should have traction and we should ensure that we're showing progress as a community. So for the first 4, Filecoin Discover, Estuary, 3000 Rice Genome Project, Pi. If you have any questions that you want the client to answer, if you're a notary that is interested in supporting but wants to understand what they're doing, please feel free, ask any questions, completely open forum, go to the issue, write your thoughts down, get your opinions. It's important for us to hear what you have to say and important for the community to support these things together. The other issue is a little bit more recent, so we have some time, but we should be taking this seriously. It's a good opportunity for us to learn how we can stretch the bounds of the program to make sure that the network is delivering value.
Yeah,
Charles,
I'm here to defend my application.
Exactly. I mean, Faye's here, that's right. And Reba is here as well for Discover. If there's any questions actually right now for Discover or 3000 Rice Genome, Charles, especially from your reading, if you have any questions, like I would happily like to take the next 2 minutes to give these guys the forum to address them, and then we can go to the next section of the conversation.
I don't have a question.
We have 7 notaries now.
I think we are going to have more in next slides.
You have 7 notaries? I thought some of the notaries that said yes to you weren't notaries at the moment.
Yeah, that's a funny part. Anyone comments that you're not a notary at the moment, how can you see that as support?
So I think that's an interesting thing, because the way we provision this thing is that a notary needs to have DataCap to be a notary, and then you need to have some DataCap to be able to participate in the large data set notary. What then happens when you lose DataCap, you run out of DataCap, is you're no longer an eligible notary. And so I don't think the solution is a good one right now, but the current solution is you're removed from the multi-sig. And I think that's okay for like the first few times, but I think we need to think as a community how we expect to graduate beyond that. But that's just food for thought. not something we need to address today. Speaking of not as many notaries, notary elections are ongoing, as you're aware. Many of you have applied. Many have reapplied. So congratulations for all of the time that was being spent on that. I really appreciate it. We are excited to share that, you know, all the scoring happened. The first pass was shared. Lots of feedback went over. Many people, you know, have already reacted to the feedback. If you haven't, or if you have questions, I want to keep the last few minutes of this call to address that. But I think the way you should perceive this is basically we should wrap up this week. So my estimation is I'll finish all the rescoring by Thursday, and then I'll post like the set of notaries that will be elected by Friday, and we'll take it from there. And so unless there's any major snags or big questions or points of confusion, I think that's how we'll be moving forward.
Yes, so the famous question boy Charles is asking.
Congratulations. What are your questions?
Yeah, I noticed that, last time during last rubric, we were talking about if a company subsidized can use parent companies' collateral as their score. Do we have conclusion for now? For example, a company has a collateral, basically like a small company in another region. Obviously, I don't have so much collateral, and I use a company in China, the node, say, okay, I have so much tokens, so I can get a high score in this application. Is that eligible?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of entities that apply that are in multiple regions. And I think the best practice that we were basically following was, if you do, like, the way you should be calculating your collateral is like accounts on which you have access to the private keys. And that collateral can include staked, unstaked, vested, unvested, future, unvested. And so if you hold the private keys and the miners in a different region, then that's fine, because many notaries that are serving as well operate in different regions, right? Like, for example, the Filecoin Foundation as well could be in NA or EU. And one of the questions I had for Megan was, please pick a region, because you can't keep floating. And so that's either you're effectively picking a region because you specifically want to be a resource for clients in that region, because you understand their needs as a client, you understand the kinds of questions you need to ask them for you to believe that you can vet them, because you're a major stakeholder of the Filecoin network. So Charles, I mean, if you have miners that you own private keys to in different regions that allow you to afford much higher collateral, but then I think they should be reported on your application, because ultimately the point of that question in the application is that's the incentive you have as a notary, right? The more you have at stake, the more likely you are to care about the success of the network, and therefore the more you have to lose, and therefore the more you're likely to have your interests aligned with this community. That's the sort of the spirit behind that question.
Okay, so if I'm a big company, I have lots of collaterals in China. Now I open branch all across the world in all the continent with 1 person or 2 person stand up company. And I use my collateral to assign to each of them so they can take seats on all the continents, right? And then when I vote, we can have the voting right in all the continents.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
Okay. Okay, good.
Yeah. I think that until we reach a point where that doesn't scale, I genuinely think, and this is just one opinion, so we should all discuss it if we don't, but I think we care more about ensuring that we're able to unblock clients than we care about this regional based thing specifically. What do you think, Charles? I think
Wow,
you're like gonna set up an entity in South America.
I'm not so rich, and I'm maybe not even be able to take a city in North America. So I'm not thinking about South America. I just think about over centralized of representative.
I think that
yes.
Yeah. That's
yes,
a valid
I agree.
question.
Like I agree that with more representative, more notaries, we can support more clients. But another question is that if one parent company so have overwhelmed influence on the notary
Yes.
side, whether it be a
that is completely reasonable. That I completely agree with. And so the framing there would also be then around you, if you're owning, like, one of the things that I want to check for is, like, when people claim that they own certain miners, they should actually own them. And so you can't expect multiple notary applications that all point to the same miner IDs to prove that they have collateral.
Not the same amount. For example, in China, there are lots of big companies. They have help set up lots of miners. Each miner have 1 PB or 2 PB or 3 PD. They kind of have some control of. If you ask them to sign a message to prove they have it, no problem. Even the subsidized, if you ask a subsidized to sign a message to prove they really have it, it's not a problem. Just send an email to their parent company, say, "Oh, please sign it for me," right? So what you are saying that to prove you have the private key, it's not a problem for them at all, because it's just asking for signing a message.
Yeah, but then there's a limit to how many regions you can be omnipresent in, because there's only one application that can be made with that.
Well, you can have different subsidies, and each subsidies apply in a region.
Yeah,
right?
you
can easily shift.
You could.
Yeah,
I
just
think
$200, and you can sign up a company in Canada.
Well, conveniently, I don't know to what extent that's happened yet, but maybe we should wisen up. I think this round of elections is relatively clean. I might be wrong. If I'm wrong, please reach out to me, because I'm still doing all the rescoring, or please flag it. I think this should be an open conversation. This should function like a dispute. But I think that as long as one parent company currently has 1 notary seat, I think we're okay. I think we get into the problem, like you said, if a parent company has multiple seats.
Yeah, one company, 1 seat, I have no problem with that. One company have 3 or 5 seats, that would be a problem for me.
Yeah, I agree. So I think if you see that happening, then I think please do raise that as a flag. Yeah. Okay, folks, I think we're at the hour. Like I mentioned, we're going to focus on wrapping these up this week. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. If not, I'm going to start rescoring, because I think many people have already responded to the feedback that we left. And so we should be able to lock this in by the end of the week. Really excited. This is a very big milestone, because together it means we've made major progress to the point where we're renewing the next set of notaries. So congratulations to all of you. And I'm excited to see how this plays out. Once again, last plug, if you're a community member or notary that has any interest in the Large Dataset Notaries, please go ask your questions, nominate yourself to be a multi-signer or a signer on the multi-sig, so that we can proceed with those as well and continue to increase the scope of the program. Thanks again for your time. Take care. Have a good rest of your days or evenings, wherever you are. And yeah, good to see everybody. See you at the next one.
Bye.